tuned in to Upskill Professionals, helping you forge a path upward. Because once you stop forecasting your future performance based on your past failures, you'll soon begin to realize just how within reach new heights truly are. Once again, my name is Chris. I'm your career coach here at Upskill Professionals. And listen, you never thought that it would happen to you. But here you are, you've been notified of your layoff or you have been fired. And now you've been applying for weeks after week after week to opportunities, but you haven't had any callbacks, bar one, where you've had the opportunity to schedule an interview with the recruiter. Now, obviously, you're excited, but at the same time, you're a little bit anxious because you know the moment is coming when the hiring manager looks down at your resume and then looks at you and says, "Hey, I noticed the gap in your work experience. Would you mind talking a little bit about that?" And if you don't know how to address that question, it is one that is likely going to come up. And you have to be able to take that potentially negative scenario in the hiring manager's mind and flip it to a positive. And so I have a 3-step framework that is going to help you answer this question no matter your situation. And at the end of explaining that framework, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what a real life answer might look like, obviously in a mock scenario. And so before we dive into the framework, what I want to make sure that we head into this conversation with, what I want to make sure that we frame this around is when you are answering this question, you want to make sure that you do 3 key things. And that is number 1, you want to maintain positive framing, both in terms of the content of your answer, but also in the tone that you deliver it with. Right? So even if you have a great answer for why you've been laid off or fired and how you've turned that around, if you deliver that answer with a sense of dejection, which shows a lack of confidence, or if you deliver that answer with a sense of animosity toward the situation or previous employer, the hiring manager is going to pick up on that. And what is not said in that scenario will speak louder than your answer. So that's the first thing, maintain a positive frame. The second thing that you want to keep in mind is you want to take accountability for the things that are within your control. And on the flip side of that, which is the third thing, you don't want to blame anyone else, even if you're justified in doing so, for the cause of your termination. Maintain positive framing, take accountability, do not blame others. So here's the 3-step framework with which you want to answer the question. Number 1, you want to explain the gap with objectivity. Number 2, you want to maximize the gap. And number 3, you want to bridge the gap. 3 key steps, very easy to remember. The first one, explain the gap with objectivity. Obviously, this is going to differ a little bit depending on whether you were laid off or fired, but you simply want to state the reason, keep it brief, keep it objective, don't be emotional, don't blame others, take accountability. If you were laid off, you want to really focus your answer on what was the shift in the business strategy, what was the change in the business objectives that led to your team being impacted. Because in a layoff situation, it's not about your personal performance, it's about the change in the business. So you want to really hone in on what was the context in which your team was impacted and how did that unfortunately trickle down to you. If you were fired, however, the likelihood is that you were fired because of poor personal performance or because of some behavior. And so you want to make sure, once again, that you remain objective, that you keep it brief, and that you take accountability for whatever happened. The second thing that you want to do is you want to maximize the gap. And so this is all about telling the story of what you did since your layoff, since your termination, to build your skill set, to improve and develop as a professional, and to prepare yourself for your next big opportunity. And so this could include the story of how you volunteered with a local organization to exercise some of your skills and keep them fresh. Again, making sure that those skills are pertinent to the job that you are applying to. Maybe that means that you took on a project where you created or added something to your portfolio as a UX designer, as a marketer, as an engineer, for example, and that's something that you can showcase as a way that you just kept your skill set current and continue to learn. Maybe that means that you took some online courses or pursued further education or certification to once again build and expand your knowledge base. How did you maximize the time off? How did you maximize the gap? And then the third thing that you want to do is you want to bridge the gap. So now that you've told the story of what's happened, now that you've told the story of how you have turned that into a learning opportunity and you've taken accountability for your progress and development, the third thing that you want to talk about is the next big thing that you want to tackle, and that should be the opportunity sitting in front of you, and you want to talk about how you can add value to the hiring manager and their team as you embark on the next step in your career journey. So those are the three key things that you want to address with your answer. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples, one in a layoff situation, one in a situation where you've been fired, on how you can employ this framework in those three key overarching themes of positivity, accountability, and not blaming others to answer these questions and really flip the narrative. So let's just say in the layoff example, an answer could look something like this. I was working within the marketing team for company X for a few years, and I was really focused on creating content for trade shows that the company hosted or that they participated in. But recently, the company decided to make a large shift in their product strategy, and as a result, they wanted to refocus their marketing efforts from attending trade shows to generating leads online and turning those into paying customers. And so as a result, they ended up acquiring a marketing firm that we had worked with in the past, which had helped us set up some of our marketing operations, and decided to bring them in-house. Then on the backside of that, in order to cut operational costs, they decided to lay off a large majority of their pre-existing marketing team. And this impacted individuals from individual contributors all the way up to leadership. And unfortunately, I was one of the 20 people impacted in that change of business priority. Since then, I've really taken the time to go online and learn more about marketing operations and how companies have tied AI into some of their marketing technology stack in order to improve operations and drive conversions. I noticed that your team is in the phase of setting up its marketing operation structure and figuring out how to drive engagement online. With my new skill set and my new certification that I obtained, I think I'd be really excited to help your team tackle this challenge. And I'd love to learn more about exactly what your team is looking at overcoming and building out. So again, just to recap on that scenario, maintaining positivity is important. I never spoke negatively on the situation. I never conveyed a sense of being dejected. I never blamed anyone else for the situation here. I simply and objectively told the story of what happened. Change in product strategy, change in marketing strategy. Company took on an agency and acquired them, which resulted in the layoff. Number two, I talked about how I maximized the gap, right? During my time off, I pursued online education, got a certification, and that happened to be in the shift that happened in my business. They wanted to erect a more robust marketing operation strategy. That's why they acquired the agency. And so that's the skill set that I went out and acquired. And then number three, I bridged the gap. So now that I've been part of that company, I saw that shift in their strategy. I went out and learned more about it. And now I have this skill set that is going to help this hiring manager and their team accelerate through the next phase of their business growth. In our second example, let's say that you've been fired and explore what that answer might sound like. In my previous role, I was responsible for delivering a weekly report to leadership, which provided insights into our product analytics, how our customers were adopting and using our tech products and our portfolio. As part of generating that report, I relied on data from a couple of other teams, and unfortunately, in a few instances, I was unable to gather that data in time for me to then run the required analyses and quality assurance before sending the report out to the relevant stakeholders. In chatting with my manager, and to discuss how we could potentially improve working relations with the teams that we required data from, or to potentially improve the process and gather that data earlier, I was still unable to deliver the report on time in a couple of instances. Since my time with the company and since my time in that opportunity, I've pursued a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt certification and achieved it, which has really taught me a lot about stakeholder management and process improvement practices. Looking back on that situation now, I realized that we were only focused on our team's core dependency, which was the data that we received from some of the teams that we worked with directly. However, we weren't really taking a holistic approach and mapping out the entire process and data flow, because some of the teams that we relied on data from also relied on data from other teams that we didn't engage with on a daily basis. So as opposed to taking that very targeted approach, we should have worked across business units and with the team of teams to come together and figure out how could we really streamline our processes, how could we eliminate some of the redundancies to ensure that we generated the report and delivered it to leadership on time. When I look at some of the challenges that your team is facing now, as you look to build out a dashboard of reports that show how your customers are adopting your technologies, I'm excited about the skills that I've learned, and I think that they could be really valuable to the work that your team is doing. Again, there goes an answer that maintains positivity. Notice that I took accountability for where things went wrong, even though there were some dependencies on other teams, and I did not speak negatively or blame them for my poor performance. I simply stated with objectivity that I relied on the data, and unfortunately, I was unable to get it on time to then turn the report around. Again, I spoke to what caused the gap, me failing to deliver the reports. How did I maximize the gap? During my time off, I pursued a certification, obtained it, learned about stakeholder management, process improvement, and thought about where things could have gone better in the previous role. And then the third thing is I bridged the gap. So with that skill set that I have honed and improved, how is that going to help the hiring manager and their team be successful in their business environment and tackle the challenges that are in front of them? And that is me leveraging that new skill set that I've gained as part of the certification to help that hiring manager then build out a dashboard ecosystem that reports on their product analytics. And so those are the three key things that you want to do. Number one, explain the gap with objectivity. Keep it brief and take accountability for the things that were within your control. Number two, talk about how you have maximized that gap. Since you've been terminated, what have you done to build your skill set and business acumen? And then number three, bridge the gap. How are you going to take that skill set and employ it in the hiring manager's team to help them and their team be successful in their business environment? And so, listen, I want to tell you that as you answer these questions about your gap in employment, you will not be judged. I'd love to tell you that, but the reality is that people hire people, and people do have inherent bias. But what I want you to remember is that as you progress through these interviews, and sometimes this judgment will be palpable, just as an interviewer is taking this opportunity to learn more about you, you should be taking that opportunity to learn more about the hiring manager and the company that you might have the opportunity to work with. And so if you do face judgment, take that as a note of the company culture that you could be stepping into. And then the last thing that I want to leave you with is, listen, it can be demoralizing, it can be tough to go through a layoff or a termination. But if you ruminate in that negativity, you are going to prevent yourself from taking the steps necessary to achieve your next success. I'm not saying don't take the time to really ingest and work through the feelings and the impact of your situation. You should definitely go through the emotions and just reflect on the experience, what happened, and how you can improve. But what I want you to do is not to sit in the negativity, but to seek out the positivity, to seek out the next steps that are going to help you bounce back better. And so listen, if you found value in this video, I hope that you hit the like button. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you can be apprised of new content as it does drop weekly, because a career is a long journey to sojourn without a guide. And if you don't believe that you can do better, I'm here to make sure you know better. Upskill professionals, helping you forge a path upward.